Welcome into the 16 Sports Extra podcast. I'm Jax Neill. That's Sabrina Hoover. Sabrina, it's been a minute since we've done an episode, right?
I know. The last one, we were talking about NCAA women's basketball, I think.
Exactly. Now, that's definitely in the off-season transfer portal stuff.
Yes.
But we're not focusing on basketball today. We're talking about football because even though it's the end of April, there's still more football stuff to talk about. And, of course, we're thinking the NFL draft, where Notre Dame had several players selected, over 530 players all time for the Irish.
Isn't that crazy?
It really is. It just kind of shows just the history of the program. But tons of picks this past weekend over the course of the 7-round draft. Just starting off, Sabrina, just I guess your biggest takeaway. Any one player you kind of want to start with, talk about, really think about, or like you like the fit, you were kind of confused about, anything you want to go, just start us off.
Right, yeah, no, and I just thinking about having 6 Notre Dame players drafted is crazy. Obviously, and you said it right there, 538. I think one player that really spoke out to me, and I very happily spoke out to me, is Mitchell Evans. Obviously, we knew his season injury in 2023. We knew how much he was, rehabbing and recovering here, and then obviously to see him get drafted by the Carolina Panthers in the 5th round is really cool to see, especially knowing how much he's come back from. I watched a press conference he did right after he got drafted, and he was like, I think that injury in 2023 made me stronger. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Panthers kind of fit his mold as a tight end. We saw a little bit of him this past season, but I don't think we've seen like the best of him yet. And I think it's going to be really cool to see him now in the NFL. Obviously, Panthers jersey and all, but I think it's going to be awesome to see how he's really rehabbed, how he's gotten stronger. We saw him during Pro Day. There's that footage right there. He looked bigger. He looked stronger. But I'm excited to see how he can fit into that team. But then I think another player too that really not really shocked me or surprised me by one bit, but I'm excited to see how he can do, is Riley Leonard. And I know we talked about not really knowing where he would fall in the draft, maybe not knowing what team he would go to, but to know that he's staying close to South Bend is actually kind of funny too, because he talked about how much in that press conference after he got drafted by the Colts, he was like, it's great to call Indiana home again. And I think that was really cool. It's just such a cool thing to know that he was such a leader on the field in South Bend, both on and off the field, and now he gets to lead now in the NFL in the Colts organization. And also, he talked about, he has to work on being disciplined in the pocket and playing on time. And I know he talked about, he's like, I'm nowhere near the quarterback that I want to be now, but he knows he has a lot of work to do. Obviously, I think, using him and his rushing ability that we saw in the college game is going to be, very, very beneficial to the Colts as well. But that one was a really big one that I'm just hoping to see both of those two players really succeed, knowing how much they just came back from during the earlier seasons, especially knowing that Riley Leonard had that, on and off, came back from that NIU loss in week 2, kind of had to work his way up, and then obviously leading to the Irish to the national championship game.
Of course, and I mean, that's, I love the Mitchell Evans shout out. I'm thinking could he be the next Greg Olsen there in Carolina? I think his game translates very well to the pro level. But of course, I want to talk a little bit more about that Riley Leonard pick, because that's what everyone's thinking about going in the 6th round. So still, kind of later on in the draft, but I'm just going to be so interested to see how his pro career kind of pans out, because you mentioned the intangibles are all there, the leadership qualities, the ability to kind of bounce back from setbacks he may have in his career, which, I mean, as a 6th round pick, you're expected to have setbacks. We know his limitations with his arm at points, but you look at that Indianapolis Colts QB room, Anthony Richardson, I mean, he's not really had the start to his career that many people hope for. Could there be a little bit of a later on in the season, Leonard gets some snaps, kind of gets in there? I could totally see that.
I agree.
Another thing we have to talk about is Xavier Watts going all the way in round 3.
Were you surprised about that? Yeah.
So, I mean, it makes sense, I think, in some ways, because a lot of times with the NFL draft, what happens is it's so much about measurables. I mean, you heard the stories about Will Campbell, the offensive tackle from LSU, his arms were a half an inch, not long enough.
Yes.
It's like, I think Joe Burrow, his hands were an inch too short or something. So a lot of times it's about these measurables and do they fit the prototypical size, athleticism or whatever for a player.
Yeah.
I think if you're Xavier Watts, it's like he's a classic example of put the tape on.
Yeah.
Just put the tape on.
Yeah.
Even though he might not be your stereotypical size for a safety or have all the measurables, his instincts are something that are also something that can't be taught. His knowledge of the game, his just ability to be in the right place at the right time. I think that's really going to translate really well to the pro game. And I was surprised to see him fall all the way to round 3. I think the Falcons got a great pick right there.
And I love that you said, not his size, but he plays big, right? Like he's everywhere on the field. I mean, we talk about how many interceptions he had this past season, but not even that, just pass breakups and obviously, just causing big situations to happen. I mean, how big he can play.
Exactly. And another guy I'm kind of going off with that is Benjamin Morrison, the guy we probably should be talking about a little bit more.
Yeah.
He was round 2, the highest selected player.
Yes.
A player that, for a lot of his career, we were thinking first round pick. Obviously, with the injury, it, caused him to drop a little bit. But he's a player along with Xavier Watts, again, where turn the tape on. When they're on the field and they're making plays, those are the types of guys that I could totally see making an impact at the next level. You see right there, Xavier Watts against Louisville. It just always seems to be in the right spot where the ball is. And if you're doing that on an NFL field, you're going to have a long career.
Yep, and there's Tyler Shuck, another quarterback that got drafted before Shedeur Sanders, by the way. Oh, just something to bring up. But no, but talking about, it's so interesting to me with Benjamin Morrison. You talked about that injury in October, having to rehab his way back. It's so cool to see. I don't know if you watched his reaction, his draft reaction to getting picked. You could just tell the way he broke down and cried in those tears. Those tears are just, gratitude, knowing that someone believed in him and just like you said, turn on the tape, can see what he can do when he's healthy. And I think to know that an organization is going to, root him on and really, have full just confidence in him, I think that means the world to him. It's going to really show on the field as well.
You know who's another turn on the tape guy is a Jack Kaiser.
Yes,
he's
110%.
He's the ultimate turn the tape on guy, now going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And one reason I really like this pick for the Jaguars specifically is because, let's be honest, Jacksonville's not been the most successful NFL franchise over the course of the past, 20 years? It's a franchise where I'm not sure the culture is really there. I'm not sure there's really that winning kind of mentality. There's not the tradition in that organization for that level of success. And this is a guy, Jack Kaiser, where if there's one thing he'll do, he'll get into that room. Even if he's not playing every snap, even if he's not the number 1 starter, he's going to change your culture. He's going to set the tone in a type of way that I think an organization like Jacksonville kind of needs. And I think that's where his skills are really going to shine.
And I love that you say that. A guy that played for the Irish for 6 seasons, can he show anymore that he's dedicated to a program at all?
Exactly. And I think that's, and another thing when you think about with Jacksonville, they're always playing those London games, so they're always traveling a lot. They have those long seasons where it's just really tough to kind of stay engaged. I don't think there's anyone more engaged, more focused of a player than Jack Kaiser, selected in round 4. Obviously in that position, might not be the starting linebacker, but he's another guy where he's going to have a long career. Even if it's just finding a spot on special teams, he's going to be a guy that kind of can find his spot, find his role, and go from there.
And I do want to point out, too, you asked him multiple questions about this in the playoffs, about having local Indiana ties. He's the first Pioneer High School player to ever get drafted to the NFL, which is humongous, knowing that he came from a small school like Pioneer High School and then a small area in Indiana, and now he's just on the big stage.
And 107th overall, when we want to hear just round 4, it's not that. Round 4 pick is still pretty impressive. There still are plenty of starting NFL players that come from that round. It's not like he was, later on or anything. He was really, really solid pick right there.
I agree.
The other player we have to touch on that was selected was defensive tackle Riley Mills, of course. He's going to the Seattle Seahawks. Again, another player, I think it's kind of a common theme with these Notre Dame players is some injury concerns there towards the end of the season. Maybe when you play, how many, was it 16 games?
Something crazy,
When you're playing an NFL season in college, of course there's going to be injury concerns, but going to the Seahawks, kind of what did you think about seeing that pick?
Yeah, definitely. We saw a lot of him in games like Florida State, making big plays like that. Honestly, the breakout season he had before that injury, it showed a lot to me about his just resilience and his aggressiveness. I think that he can really put that to the NFL. And obviously, just his attitude, he just seems so just fired up all the time. You see it right there when he got that sack. He can bring that to an NFL organization. I feel like he is going to. And I think,
we've kind of mentioned it with every single player with these, but I think it's a common theme, which is Notre Dame in general, is the culture. A lot of times, I saw some discourse online about this where it seems like consistently these Notre Dame guys are getting picked, we're sent in the 3rd round, the 4th round, the 5th, the 6th, And these are the types of guys that always just kind of stick around on rosters.
Yeah.
Play 5 years in the league, have a 4 or 6 year career, just consistently find, bounce around from maybe 1 or 2 or 3 teams, but consistently find spots on a 53-man roster. And I think that kind of goes to show the level of the program there is. And in terms of, maybe the measurables and all that.
Right.
Think about this for Notre Dame. This is a team that went to the national championship game and did not have a first-round pick.
That's
a
crazy.
lot of these guys were key in that run. And especially in this era of college football where there is 16 games to get to the national championship, where it is that many games you have to play. These guys, not only were they producing at a high level, they were producing at a high level over the course of a number of games that we have really never even seen close to before.
No, and I think that also goes back to coaching, right? I mean, Marcus Freeman talks about it all the time. It's just winning the day. And obviously he talks about all the hard work that goes into this. A lot of these players, you can tell they just respect Marcus Freeman so much. So when you're playing for a program like Notre Dame, you want to win for your head coach. Like, not only for your head coach, also for other things as well. But Marcus Freeman is a guy that loves competitiveness. And I think he shows that on and off the field as well when he's coaching. So to know that, all these 6 players got drafted to the NFL, I think when you're looking at a program like Notre Dame, that, you can be developed here. Like, you can get developed by a good coaching staff that cares for you, that wants to see you win, but also wants to see you win off the field as well.
And I think for a lot of fans that might be, maybe disappointed in where these guys are getting drafted or something like that, like we kind of mentioned, they'll stick around with on rosters. But I think, again, to your coaching point, usually when you think of national championship teams, you need that high-end talent. And the fact that Marcus Freeman was able to take a roster that, had 6 draft picks, but they were just kind of scattered throughout the later half, day 2, day 3 picks. The idea is that there's plenty of players on this current roster, Jeremiah Love, Bryce Young, guys that I totally 100% think, and from everything you read from scouts, they agree of these guys are future first-round picks.
100%.
That the level that Marcus Freeman has not only been able to coach up the players that have been on the roster before he got, before that he didn't necessarily recruit, but then now he's then also bringing in high-level, talented players that are going to be, in the first 32 picks. I think that's where you're really going to see this Notre Dame program take off, is that if you look at the roster, you look at the depth chart, there's even more talented players than some of these guys in terms of draft grades. Now, will they succeed as much? You never know. College football, there's plays can go either way. But in terms of draft grades, there's actually players on the roster that are freshmen, sophomores, juniors that actually have higher draft grades than what we saw from this past draft. And this past draft was a national championship team that got to the game and had that late comebacks almost. So it's that's, I think, what you have to take away from it if you're a Notre Dame fan looking at this program and what this NFL draft tells you about the state of the program.
No, definitely. And then do we want to go, through the, what's it called, undrafted players a little bit?
Of course.
Okay.
Got 3 undrafted free agent signees. Howard Cross going to the Cincinnati Bengals, Bo Collins to the New York Giants, and Jordan Clark to the New York Jets. I think, Clark with obviously, having just that NFL family, it's he knows exactly, that's a guy where for an organization, you want to bring him in because he knows how to be a pro. He knows exactly what's going to be asked of him. He knows exactly what to do.
Yep.
Bo Collins, I think for him, again, this past season, I liked what I saw in flashes, but again, just did not have the production to get into those first 7 rounds. If you're going to get drafted as a receiver, you would either need to be crazy with the measurables and run on a 4.340, or you need to have a little more production in college. I think that's what kind of hurt him specifically.
Yeah, definitely. And I think Bo Collins, what was it, the first game of the season against Texas A&M where he had that huge catch. It kind of showed his personality a little bit after that little, push after the play a little bit. But no, I still think, he can be just a great player on the field for the NFL. I think obviously you're right. He might not have the measurables or something that a player like a great wide receiver in the NFL might have, but I think he has that talent, but also that confidence as well.
And then obviously Howard Cross into the Cincinnati Bengals, kind of just another guy where we'll kind of see. I mean, again, I think he's a player where, if we're being honest, throughout the practices we would see him. I think we would mention someone like a Bryce Young or some of the other guys, these younger guys on the roster who are saying have higher draft grades. During practice, Howard Cross did look smaller than them. He did not have the measurables these other guys that are younger on this roster have, and that's why I see him be an undrafted free agent. But still, if I'm an organization, I think, and I got to sign an undrafted free agent, Notre Dame's kind of one of those programs I would kind of go to first. They'd be one of my first calls. And Cincinnati Bengals, there's a defensive coordinator there that might know who Howard Cross is.
Might have put in a few good words for him.
I was going to say.
That's really cool. But also Howard Cross, I think we talked about with Riley Mills, they've had some injuries here and there, but to see Howard Cross kind of bounce back from those injuries and put it on the tape, it has been really, really cool to see.
And, one last thing, too, I'm going to talk about before we wrap up this 16 Sports Extra podcast, because there are some sports in season, actually. It's not just football around here, even though it feels like that sometimes. We'll have a couple months off now before fall camp gets started and spring being completely over. Lacrosse.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sports.
I was going to say, Notre Dame lacrosse. I mean, on Saturday, if you were there, it was beautiful weather, by the way, when they played Penn. If you were there, you might have gotten a little bit frustrated in the first half. They were down 6-2 heading into halftime. Third quarter came out, it seemed like a completely different team. I mean, they had like 4 goals back to back, I believe. Won the game 10-8. It's amazing to see how they have finished the regular season. I know you can touch on this as well, Jackson, but to see, how many players they lost going into this new year, but then just speaks highly of this program, knowing how much talent they lost, but then what they can do towards the end of the regular season.
Exactly. And I mean, you mentioned there the how they've ended the regular season, because I think for a second there, earlier on in the regular season, after a couple close, losses, there were some alarm bells sounding, because if you don't know much about, NCAA lacrosse, it's really easy to get onto the tournament bubble real quick. There is not a lot of teams make that. If you look at the percentages of how many teams are in D1 men's lacrosse compared to how many teams make the tournament, it's not a lot. It is a very selective field, and when you're playing in the ACC, when basically every single program you're going up against in conference has national championship banners, that makes it even tougher as well. But I think what you just see is throughout the past time that Kevin Corrigan's been here, Notre Dame was previously always really good, but can never really take over that final hump. Obviously, the past 2 national championships have kind of changed that, but I think what they've also really changed is just the mindset overall of this team of, like you said, you get down, you lose that game, could you be then going to the tournament bubble even though you're really high up in the ACC? Yes, that's how the NCAA men's lacrosse bracket works, but there's none of that. We don't have to talk about that, because this is a team that Corrigan knows how to get them peaking at exactly the right time, and I think that there's almost like this system and expectation now within the program that, it's late April, it's going to be early May, these are the games we win.
Yeah.
Even if stuff didn't go right early on in the season, these are the games we're going to win.
Yeah, and then they start the ACC tournament in Charlotte, correct, against Syracuse?
Yes, down there in North Carolina.
Awesome.
ACC tournament's always there in like Charlotte or Durham or something like that. It's always or Greensboro. That's what I was thinking of for the women's basketball, but it's always somewhere down there in North Carolina. Hopefully, probably some pretty nice weather as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say pretty nice weather. Hey, we're getting nice weather now, so
exactly. And just one last thing over that. I mean, even though Penn has not had the best season, like if when it comes to lacrosse, Ivy League is probably one of, if not the best conference in the sport consistently. So that's a big thing of, like, if you're not usually dialed into the sport, you might think, Ivy League. In lacrosse, Ivy League is like almost like SEC Big Ten, for football. But yeah, just still a lot to talk about, Sabrina. It's crazy how sports work that way. It's like, we're in the off season. Yeah, there's always something going on.
I know. NFL draft, was like 3 days, and I was like, all right, here are the picks. Oh, here we go. Here's some more, and then it was just continuing on. But hey, it gives us content and also stuff to talk about. So.
Exactly. So we'll have plenty more kind of coming up later on next week. We'll see what the men's lacrosse team kind of does. Kind of see what our plans are for this podcast over the course of the summer. Maybe a little South Bend Cubs talk, depending on how the team's doing as well. But we'll kind of keep all of that up to date. Sabrina, thank you so much. And I'll see you in the next edition of the 16 Sports Extra podcast.